The life of Jeremiah "Liver-Eating" Johnson is a gripping tale that unfolds against the backdrop of the rugged and unforgiving landscapes of the American West during the 19th century. His story is a complex narrative filled with dramatic twists, personal transformations, and the harsh realities of frontier life. Johnson's journey takes him from relative obscurity to becoming one of the most legendary figures of the American frontier, embodying the spirit of resilience, survival, and rugged individualism that defined the era. Jeremiah Johnson, born as John Jeremiah Garrison on July 1, 1824, in the small town of Little York, Hunterdon County, New Jersey, entered the world in a period where historical records were often sparse and inconsistent. His early life remains shrouded in mystery due to the lack of detailed documentation from the time. What is known is that Johnson's childhood in New Jersey was brief and likely unremarkable, as he soon felt the call of adventure and the pull of the vast, untamed wilderness that lay far beyond the confines of his small town. As a teenager, Johnson's restlessness led him to leave his home in search of a life that would eventually take him to the farthest reaches of the American frontier. Even at a young age, he was an imposing figure, standing at 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighing approximately 260 pounds, considerably larger than the average man of his time, who typically stood around 5 feet 6 inches. This physical stature would serve him well in the challenges that lay ahead. During the Mexican-American War, despite being underage, Johnson enlisted in the U.S. Navy. His time in the Navy, however, was marked by a significant and life-altering incident. Johnson found himself involved in a physical altercation with a superior officer, an act that was severely frowned upon in the strict military hierarchy of the time. The details of this confrontation are not fully documented, but it was serious enough to put Johnson's future in jeopardy. Faced with the prospect of a military tribunal and the harsh punishments that could follow, including the possibility of spending years, if not a lifetime, in a military prison, Johnson made a drastic decision. He deserted the Navy, choosing the uncertain and perilous life of a fugitive over the certainty of severe punishment. Adopting the alias John Johnson, he fled into the vast and untamed wilderness of the American West. The decision to desert and disappear into the frontier was a pivotal moment in Johnson's life, setting him on a path that would transform him into one of the most formidable figures of the American frontier. The West, with its lawlessness, vast distances, and harsh conditions, offered both peril and opportunity to those bold enough to venture into it. Upon arriving in the West, Johnson's imposing size and strength quickly made him a notable figure. He initially took up work as a woodcutter, a physically demanding job that involved felling trees and supplying wood for the steamboats that navigated the rivers of the frontier. His large frame and exceptional physical strength made him well suited for this labor-intensive work. Despite the grueling nature of the job, Johnson proved to be capable and resourceful, traits that would serve him well in the years to come. For a brief period, Johnson explored the possibility of becoming a shipbuilder, but he soon found his interests shifting toward the opportunities presented by the gold rush in Montana. The discovery of gold in Alder Gulch, Montana, had sparked a massive influx of fortune seekers to the region, each hoping to strike it rich. Johnson was among them, drawn by the promise of wealth and the excitement of the gold fields. He settled in Alder Gulch, a bustling hub of activity during the gold rush era, where people from all walks of life converged in pursuit of their dreams. However, the frenetic pace and transient nature of gold mining life soon lost its appeal for Johnson. As the initial excitement of gold mining faded, he began to realize that his true calling lay not in the pursuit of wealth, but in the rugged and challenging lifestyle of the mountain man. The mountain men were legendary figures of the American frontier, known for their survival skills, exploration of uncharted territories, and their ability to navigate the dangerous and unpredictable world of the wilderness. Embracing this new role, Johnson fully immersed himself in the life of a mountain man. He became an expert hunter, trapper, and outdoorsman, navigating the harsh and often deadly conditions of the frontier with skill and tenacity. His reputation as a mountain man grew, bolstered by his numerous confrontations and adventures in the wild. It was during this time that the stories and legends of Jeremiah "Liver-Eating" Johnson began to take shape, cementing his place in the annals of American frontier history. One of the most enduring aspects of Johnson's legend is his reputation for fierce retribution against his enemies, particularly during his alleged vendetta against the Crow Nation, who were believed to have killed his wife. According to popular lore, Johnson hunted down and killed numerous Crow warriors, allegedly cutting out and eating their livers as a form of ritualistic revenge, a gruesome practice that earned him the nickname Liver-Eating Johnson. While the exact details of these stories are difficult to verify, they have become a key part of the legend that surrounds his name. Jeremiah Johnson's life is a testament to the rugged individualism and indomitable spirit required to survive and thrive in the unforgiving environment of the American West. His transformation from a young naval deserter to a legendary figure of the frontier illustrates the dramatic and often violent nature of life in the 19th century American wilderness. His exploits, whether grounded in fact or embellished by legend, continue to captivate the imagination and serve as a powerful symbol of the frontier era. The notorious vendetta against the Crow tribe became a defining chapter in Johnson's life, weaving itself into the fabric of his legend. This personal crusade, marked by intense confrontations and unyielding resolve, played a crucial role in shaping his larger-than-life persona. It was these encounters, coupled with his relentless pursuit of frontier justice, that cemented Johnson's legacy as a symbol of resilience and unbending determination in the unforgiving wilderness of the American frontier. Johnson, like many young men of his time, aspired to become a skilled trapper and hunter, driven by the allure of a life lived in harmony with the untamed land. He understood that to survive and thrive in the harsh environment of the mountains, he needed to master a wide array of essential survival skills. His journey toward becoming a mountain man led him to seek out a mentor who could impart this critical knowledge. This quest brought Johnson into contact with John Hatcher, an experienced mountain man known throughout the region for his exceptional skills and reclusive lifestyle. Despite his preference for solitude, Hatcher was a figure of considerable repute, respected by those who knew of his exploits. Recognizing the raw potential in the eager young Johnson, Hatcher agreed to take him on as an apprentice. He invited Johnson to his remote cabin, nestled along the banks of the Little Snake River in northern Colorado, where the young man would undergo rigorous training. At Hatcher's secluded cabin, Johnson was immersed in a comprehensive education in the ways of the wilderness. Hatcher began by teaching him how to hunt, a skill vital for survival in the wild. Johnson learned to use both a hawk and a rifle with precision, understanding that his ability to secure food could mean the difference between life and death. Hatcher also instructed him in the critical art of starting campfires using nothing but sticks, a skill necessary not only for cooking but also for maintaining warmth during the cold, unforgiving nights. Hatcher emphasized the importance of vigilance in the face of the wilderness's many dangers. He taught Johnson how to recognize and avoid encounters with dangerous wildlife such as bears and rattlesnakes. Should avoidance prove impossible, Hatcher made sure Johnson knew how to defend himself effectively against these formidable threats, ensuring his survival in the most perilous situations. In addition to these fundamental survival skills, Hatcher introduced Johnson to the intricate and demanding craft of trapping. The fur trade was a lucrative industry at the time, and mastering this skill was essential for anyone seeking to make a living in the mountains. Johnson learned how to set a variety of traps, each designed to capture different types of animals. He became proficient in skinning and curing the furs, preparing them for trade. This knowledge was invaluable, as furs could be exchanged for vital supplies, tools, and other necessities. Hatcher, impressed by Johnson's quick learning and determination, saw in him a capable and enthusiastic student. Over time, Johnson honed his skills, transforming from a novice into a competent mountain man under Hatcher's watchful eye. By around 1847, Hatcher had decided that the time had come for him to retire from the demanding life of a mountain man. He planned to move east, leaving behind the rugged life he had known for so long. Before departing, Hatcher bid a heartfelt farewell to his apprentice, entrusting him to continue the life of a mountain man on his own. Johnson, now fully trained but suddenly alone, faced the prospect of a solitary existence in the wilderness. However, he soon realized that he did not want to live in complete isolation. Johnson's thoughts turned to companionship, and he decided that he wanted a wife to share his life with. During the previous year, while exploring the Bitterroot Valley in Montana, Johnson had encountered the Flathead Indian tribe. During his time with the tribe, he had been offered a unique opportunity. An assistant chief had proposed that Johnson marry his daughter in exchange for some furs. The offer had intrigued Johnson, and now, with Hatcher's departure imminent, he saw it as a chance to build a life with someone by his side. Determined to see if the offer still stood, Johnson made his way back to the Bitterroot Valley. Upon his arrival, he found that the proposal was still valid, and he soon married the chief's daughter. With his new bride by his side, Johnson returned to his cabin along the Little Snake River, ready to start a new chapter in his life. As autumn deepened and the first signs of winter appeared, Johnson threw himself into preparations for the coming cold months. He knew that he would soon need to leave his wife alone in the cabin while he embarked on a long and arduous fur-trapping expedition. To ensure her safety and comfort during his absence, Johnson meticulously stocked the cabin with food, firewood, and other essential supplies. He took great care to make sure that everything she might need was in place before he departed, knowing that her survival through the harsh winter depended on it. With everything in order, Johnson set out on his journey, leaving his wife behind in the cabin, secure in the knowledge that he had done all he could to provide for her. This experience, and the responsibilities he now carried, marked a significant turning point in Johnson's life, solidifying his reputation as a man of the frontier, resilient, resourceful, and unwavering in his determination to carve out a life in the wilderness. Understanding the potential dangers she might face while living in the harsh wilderness, Johnson took the initiative to teach her how to use his rifle for self-defense. In return, she taught him to speak her native Sash language. During this period, something significant happened unbeknownst to Johnson. His wife became pregnant. Confident that he had prepared adequately and trusting in his wife's ability to manage in his absence, Johnson set out on his journey, making a solemn vow to return by the following spring. However, when he returned several weeks later, he was met with a horrific and heartbreaking scene. The cabin he had built had burned to the ground, its door left wide open, revealing the skeletal remains of his wife. The evidence suggested that she had been exposed to the brutal winter elements and attacked by predatory wildlife. From the signs left behind, Johnson deduced that members of the Crow tribe, a neighboring Native American group, had killed her. As he searched through the charred remains, Johnson made a gut-wrenching discovery: a small, delicate skull nestled beneath his wife's rib cage, confirming the tragic truth that she had been pregnant at the time of her murder. Overwhelmed with seething rage and a burning desire for vengeance, Johnson swore to avenge his wife and unborn child's deaths. Driven by this fury, he left the devastated remains of his home, determined to hunt down and kill the members of the Crow tribe responsible for this atrocity. The murder of his family deeply changed Johnson, filling him with a relentless rage that altered the course of his life forever. This tragic event set him on a path of unyielding vengeance. Shortly afterward, the mutilated bodies of Crow warriors began to surface throughout the region, horrifying both their fellow tribesmen and the White Mountain men who found them. These warriors had not only been scalped but also had their livers brutally removed. As the number of these grisly discoveries increased, it became clear to other mountain men that Johnson was on a ruthless killing spree, targeting the Crow tribe. Word spread that Johnson was not just killing these warriors but also consuming their livers, a gruesome act that added a chilling dimension to his already fearsome reputation. Historians estimate that Johnson, later known as Liver-Eating Johnson, killed over 300 Crow during his decade-long rampage. This relentless campaign of violence left the Crow tribe in a state of terror and disarray. Desperate to stop the slaughter, the Crow chiefs assembled an elite group of their 20 strongest warriors, tasked with tracking down and killing Johnson. Despite their best efforts, none of these warriors ever returned, leading to the belief that they, too, had fallen victim to Johnson's wrath. In Crow culture, the liver is essential for entering the afterlife. By consuming his victims' livers, Johnson not only ended their physical lives but also condemned their spirits, preventing them from finding peace in the afterlife. His actions struck terror into the Crow, creating a legacy of fear and violence that would be remembered for generations. Biographers Raymond Thorpe and Robert Bunker, in their book Crow Killer, argue that Johnson's killing spree was driven by a perverse love of killing. They recount a particularly gruesome incident in which Johnson poisoned and killed 29 Blackfeet warriors with strychnine-laced biscuits, treating it as a form of twisted entertainment. This incident, along with other tales of Johnson's ruthless behavior, contributed to the legend that grew around him. The narrative recounts the extraordinary and perilous experience of John Liver-Eating Johnson, a famed mountain man, during one of his most harrowing encounters in the American frontier. The story begins during a treacherous winter journey, spanning over 500 miles, where Johnson was transporting whiskey to trade with the Flathead tribe. This journey was fraught with danger, not only due to the harsh winter conditions but also because of the constant threat posed by hostile Native American tribes. As Johnson ventured through the wilderness, he was ambushed by a group of Blackfoot warriors. The Blackfoot were known for their fierceness in battle, and their intention was clear: they planned to capture Johnson and sell him to the Crow tribe, who were his sworn enemies. The warriors managed to overpower Johnson, stripping him of his upper garments and binding him tightly with leather cords. His situation was dire. He was left in a teepee under the guard of a single Blackfoot warrior, with his future looking grim. However, Johnson was not a man to be easily subdued. Known for his formidable physical strength and resourcefulness, he began to formulate a plan to escape. Despite the seemingly inescapable bindings, Johnson used every ounce of his strength and cunning to break free from the leather cords that bound him. This was no small feat, as the cords would have been tightly secured to ensure he couldn't escape. Once freed, Johnson's next move was equally audacious. He silently approached the unsuspecting guard and, with a powerful kick, knocked the warrior unconscious. This act alone demonstrated not just Johnson's physical prowess, but also his ability to stay calm and calculated under extreme pressure. But Johnson's actions did not stop there. In a display of brutal frontier justice, he took the guard's own knife and scalped him. The act of scalping was not just a means of ensuring the warrior was dead, but it also served to further Johnson's fierce reputation among both his enemies and allies. What happened next is perhaps the most gruesome part of the tale, adding to the legend that surrounded Johnson. After scalping the warrior, Johnson cut off one of the guard's legs. In a shocking and macabre act, he later smoked the flesh of the leg to preserve it as jerky. This act of cannibalism, though horrifying, was a stark reflection of the brutal survival tactics sometimes employed in the unforgiving wilderness of the American West. Following this grisly act, Johnson knew he had little time before the other Blackfoot warriors discovered the escape and pursued him. He fled into the wilderness, beginning what would be an excruciating 200-mile journey through harsh and unforgiving terrain. The winter conditions would have made this journey even more perilous, with deep snow, freezing temperatures, and scarce food sources. Yet, Johnson, driven by his will to survive and his intimate knowledge of the land, managed to endure this grueling trek. Finally, after enduring immense physical and mental challenges, he reached the safety of the cabin belonging to his trapping partner, Delgue. This episode in Johnson's life occurred during a period of significant transformation in the American West. The once vast herds of buffalo, which had been central to the way of life for many Native American tribes, were rapidly declining due to overhunting and the expansion of European settlers. The fur trade, which had once been a lucrative industry for trappers like Johnson, was also in decline due to the depletion of beaver populations, which had been heavily trapped for their pelts. As a result, large game animals were becoming increasingly scarce, forcing mountain men like Johnson to adapt their lifestyles. At the same time, Native American tribes were facing catastrophic changes. As settlers moved westward, the U.S. government increasingly encroached on native lands, leading to violent conflicts and the forced relocation of tribes onto reservations. The traditional way of life for many Native Americans was being systematically dismantled, leading to widespread suffering and loss. It was during this tumultuous period that Johnson's legend grew. His violent encounters and ruthless survival tactics were not just a means of self-preservation, but also a response to the changing and increasingly hostile environment of the American West. Over the course of 25 years, Johnson engaged in a relentless conflict with the Crow tribe. This feud was marked by intense violence, with Johnson earning the nickname Tyak Saruka, or Crow Killer, among the Crow people. The conflict was deeply personal, rooted in both vengeance and the harsh realities of survival on the frontier. Eventually, however, a significant shift occurred. After decades of bloodshed, a peace agreement was reached between Johnson and the Crow tribe. This reconciliation was remarkable, given the long history of animosity and violence. The Crow, who had once been Johnson's fiercest enemies, came to accept him as one of their own. This acceptance marked the end of a long-standing feud that had claimed many lives, highlighting the complex and often contradictory relationships between individuals and Native American tribes during this period. Despite this reconciliation, the American West remained a violent and contested region. The Plains Indian Wars of the mid-19th century saw numerous Native American tribes, including the Sioux and Blackfoot, fiercely resist the encroachment of settlers and the U.S. military. Johnson, even after his personal vendetta against the Crow had ended, continued to live the rugged life of a mountain man. He primarily hunted and trapped to earn a living, although he also engaged in other ventures, such as selling whiskey. In 1864, Johnson enlisted with the 2nd Colorado Cavalry as a sharpshooter for the Union Army in St. Louis. Despite his previous desertion from the U.S. Navy, his enlistment was either overlooked or forgiven, possibly due to the Union Army's desperate need for experienced soldiers during the Civil War. Johnson's skills as a marksman and his knowledge of frontier warfare made him a valuable asset to the Union Army. After the Civil War ended in 1865, Johnson received an honorable discharge, a testament to his service despite his earlier desertion. Returning to the West, Johnson continued to use his formidable skills as a tracker and scout during the Indian Wars. His ability to navigate the wilderness and track both animals and people made him an invaluable resource. Later in life, Johnson transitioned into law enforcement, serving as a deputy sheriff in Carlson, Montana, and in Elkhornville, Colorado. He eventually became the town marshal of Red Lodge, Montana, where his reputation as a tough and capable lawman further solidified. Johnson's life took another turn when he ventured into show business. He started an amateur Wild West show, where he traveled with other famous figures like Calamity Jane. These shows were a form of entertainment that capitalized on the public's fascination with the frontier and its legendary figures. Johnson would regale audiences with stories of his adventures and conflicts with Native Americans, further embellishing his already larger-than-life persona. In early 1878, the Washington Post mistakenly reported Johnson's death, describing him as a vicious frontiersman who had killed Native Americans for sport or revenge. This erroneous report was picked up by other newspapers, which seized upon his infamous nickname, Liver-Eating Johnson, and detailed his supposed acts of cannibalism. As these stories spread, Johnson's legend became increasingly intertwined with violent mythology, making it nearly impossible to separate fact from fiction. Johnson himself may have contributed to this confusion, revising or embellishing his accounts in newspaper interviews, further blurring the lines between his real-life experiences and the mythic figure he became. In the later stages of his life, Johnson made a profound transition by moving to California, a region that starkly contrasted with the wild and untamed landscapes that had shaped his existence. This move was especially surprising, given Johnson's lifelong tendency to avoid the trappings of modern civilization. Despite his rugged background and his reputation as a man of the wilderness, he eventually found himself in the bustling city of Los Angeles, a place far removed from the remote mountain ranges and forests he once called home. Ironically, the man who had spent decades living in isolation, far from the comforts of society, spent his final days in the Old Soldiers' Home in Southern California. This institution, located in the heart of Los Angeles, provided care for aging veterans, a far cry from the rough, self-sufficient lifestyle Johnson had once led. On January 21, 1900, Johnson passed away at the age of 76, having outlived many of his contemporaries. His death marked the end of a remarkable life, though it was a life that concluded in relative obscurity and poverty. After his death, Johnson was buried in a military cemetery in Los Angeles, where his grave remained for the next 75 years. During this time, the city of Los Angeles continued to grow and develop, its urban sprawl eventually enveloping the once quiet cemetery. By the early 1970s, Johnson's grave was located just a short distance from the busy San Diego freeway, a symbol of the dramatic changes that had taken place since his time. In 1972, the film Jeremiah Johnson, featuring Robert Redford in the title role, brought Johnson's story back into the public consciousness. The film portrayed the life of a rugged mountain man, inspired by Johnson's own experiences, and it rekindled interest in his extraordinary life. The contrast between the film's depiction of Johnson's rugged existence and the reality of his final resting place, surrounded by the noise and chaos of a modern freeway, highlighted the incongruity of his burial site. 2 years later, in 1974, a campaign was launched to move Johnson's remains to a more fitting location. This effort was led by a dedicated schoolteacher and her 25 fifth-grade students, who believed that Johnson deserved a final resting place that honored his legacy as a legendary mountain man. Their campaign succeeded, and Johnson's remains were exhumed and relocated to Cody, Wyoming, a place much closer to the wild landscapes he had once called home. His new grave was situated near the Shoshone River, a setting that resonated with the spirit of adventure and rugged independence that had defined his life. At his new resting place, a simple yet poignant epitaph was inscribed on his tombstone, "No More Trails." This inscription serves as a fitting tribute to a man who had spent his life exploring the farthest reaches of the American wilderness, forging his path through some of the most challenging terrain in the country.